Hello and welcome, this is Gunner, and in this video I'm going to list my favorite mechs from the BattleTech universe that are due to launch in the upcoming release of the BattleTech video game. This video will be in the format of my previous BattleTech list videos, and to avoid duplication, I will not be including mechs that I have previously featured. With that being said, this was a tough list to make as there are several mechs I like, but I don't want this video to be overly long, so I had to condense my list down and in the process make some hard choices. Usually I aim for a list of 5, but in this case I couldn't pare it down to any lower than 6 without omitting a mech I really felt should be on this list. The order of this list will be one of my choosing, mostly focusing on the roles I feel these mechs fill rather than ranking them by how much I like them. I'll be using data from the tabletop game to represent the abilities of each mech. Although not a perfect representation of how these mechs will be in the video game, it does give a point of comparison. My first choice is one more of the heart than of the head, as I fully recognize that it may not really be all that good of a mech. The 40-ton Cicada has a walking movement of 8 and a running movement of 12 with no jump jets, which for overland speed is excellent for its weight class. Unfortunately, the Cicada trades a lot for that speed. Armed with 2 medium lasers and a small laser, max and adjusted damage per ton is 0.33, with only 3 other mechs of those going to be in the video game having worse damage per ton numbers. With that being said, when compared to other mechs in the scout role, it is at least competitive when looking at raw damage numbers. Armor per ton numbers don't fare much better at a score of 1.6. Only one other mech has worse numbers than this. Considering the light armament, heat efficiency is very good at 143%. The Cicada doesn't have to usually worry about heat and can keep up weapons fire indefinitely without having to worry about ammunition stores. An obvious comparison can be made between the Cicada and the Locust. Both serve the same scouting role, have the same movement capabilities, and the same amount of armor. It is weaponry and mass that gives the Cicada the edge, when looking at the standard variants of each mech. That being said, the vast weight of the engine needed to propel the twice as heavy Cicada leaves it with fewer options in regards to variants, with the Locust enjoying more flexibility in this regard. Also, the standard Cicada may be slightly better than the standard version of the Locust, but at what cost? It is twice as heavy, and as mentioned earlier, a powerful engine is needed to propel it at the speeds it is capable of. Those things don't come cheaply. With all that being said, this mech is on this list because of my own personal affinity for it. This is the mech I piloted when I first started playing the tabletop game, and with it, I have scored a few kills. It may not be the best mech out there, but for me, it is my mech, and it shaped the style of play that I like. A cool running mech with entirely energy-based weapons mean that this is a mech that never has to stop firing, paired with very good mobility as the mech's main strengths. The massive engine makes modifying the mech difficult, with the CDA-3C downrating the engine to fit heavier firepower. We will have to see what all can be done in the mech lab when the game releases. My main worry for the Cicada when considering the video game is that its heavier weight puts it at the lower end of the medium class, and as seen so far in the beta version of the video game, initiative is determined by weight class, so in this regard, the Cicada will be at a distinct disadvantage compared to other mechs in its role. The inability to run, or as the video game calls it, sprint, and fire weapons also affects not only the Cicada's playing style, but affects many light mechs in general. Unless rebalanced, scout mechs with jump jets will have a significant edge as they can fire after jumping. The Cicada shaped my love for mobility and hit-and-run attacks, and in that regard, the Jenner is a strong performer. At 35 tons, it has a walking speed of 7 and running speed of 11, mobility aided further by a jumping movement of 5. The Jenner's strength, along with its mobility, is its weight of firepower, armed with 4 medium lasers and an SRM-4, scoring max damage per ton numbers of 0.8 and adjusted numbers of 0.71. Heat efficiency is one of its main weaknesses at 67%. Jumping and alpha striking will build up a lot of heat. Armor is equivalent to that found on the Cicada, but as the Jenner is lighter, it scores a better armor per ton number of 1.83, which is still rather low and the other main weakness of the Jenner. Also serving in the scout role, when the Jenner is used offensively, it is all about hit-and-run attacks. Whereas the cool running nature of the Cicada allows it to continuously fire upon its enemies, the Jenner must have time to cool off the heat the weapons can generate. Its strong mobility allows it to do just that, breaking contact with the enemy after charging in to fire a salvo into them. In a way, this may be the wiser engagement strategy of such a lightly armored mech, hopefully breaking away far enough so that the enemy cannot counterattack the mech at all. This does mean that the Jenner has less options when it comes to attacking, but in this way of fighting, the mech is extremely effective. The JR7-F variant attempts to combat the two weaknesses of the Jenner by removing the SRM-4, thus lessening the total heat the weapons can generate, while at the same time strengthening the armor with the tonnage saved. This variant can still run quite hot, but the additional armor allows it some roll flexibility and the ability to take some more chances. Although this comes at the cost of some damage, this variant's firepower is still strong for its class. As much as I like mobility and hit-and-run style combat, piloting lightly armored mechs has made me appreciate the value of strong armor, and when it comes to the medium weight class, armor protection doesn't get any better than that of the Kintaro. At 55 tons, the Kintaro also has a decent mobility, with a walking speed of 5 and running of 8 with no jump jets. The mech is extremely well armed with 3 SRM-6s, an LRM-5, and a single medium laser, scoring a max damage per ton of 0.93 and adjusted of 0.67. Most of the weight of the firepower is aimed at medium to short ranges, with only the LRM-5 providing long-range damage, and is heavily dependent on ammunition-fed weapons, attaching a duration to its effectiveness, and multiplying the potential threat of ammunition explosions. Heat efficiency is also poor at 50%. As stated earlier, armor protection is good at an armor per ton score of 3.2. The Kintaro is a mech very much about attacking in bursts. For the first couple turns it engages the enemy, it can bring a fury down on your opponents like few others, but it's a fury that quickly ebbs as the heat builds. Thankfully for the pilot, the decent mobility of the mech can help break from the enemy for a bit of a breather if needed, although if the initial engagement goes to plan, there may not be much of the enemy left when the Kintaro needs to take a break. The strong armor of the Kintaro allows it to serve in the frontline role, with its firepower being more than enough of a threat to make it hard for your opponent to ignore the mech. Its mobility and devastating initial barrage also allows it to serve a specialty attacker role, effectively ambushing and skirmishing with the enemy. This tactic will have to rely on ample cover, good positioning, and being able to bait the enemy, but if used in this role, the Kintaro will have time in between engagements to reset for the next attack. This tactic works at its best if the Kintaro is supported by strong, long-range fire from its lance mates, hopefully forcing the enemy to come to you. This is a strategy that is situational, which is why I consider this a specialty role. Speaking of long-range support, the next mech on this list is my favorite support mech in BattleTech. The 65-ton Catapult has a walking speed of 4 and running speed of 6 with a jumping movement of 4. Armed with 2 LRM-15s and 4 medium lasers, the mech can produce a max damage per ton of 0.77 and adjusted damage per ton of 0.62. A heat efficiency of 68% is not bad for its weight class and role. If the weapons are fired in groups based on their range brackets, heat should not be much of a problem, even when jumping. It is only when mixing weapon groups that heat buildup becomes more of a problem. Armor per ton is 2.46, which again is decent for its role. There's a lot I like about the Catapult. I consider it one of the coolest looking mechs in the game, and it is a very effective mech to boot. It has good long-range firepower that unfortunately is limited by the ammunition stores of the mech. The Catapult will run out of ammo in most engagements, so the trick is to make the LRM fire count while it lasts. After the ammunition runs dry, the mech is not helpless. 4 medium lasers are nothing to laugh off, and the decent armor protection of the mech can allow the Catapult to protect itself against light flankers or step forward to give a much-needed second wind to the front line of your lance, after the enemy has been softened up. Jump jets give the Catapult the ability to skirmish effectively, jumping behind hills where indirect fire can still strike the enemy. In this regard, I think the Catapult works well to support a more mobile style of play. There are quite a few variants of the Catapult, some of which focus more on the long-range firepower of the mech, usually at the expense of the lasers. One variant of the Catapult in particular, the CPLT-K2, modifies the mech heavily, replacing the LRMs with PPCs and 2 of the lasers for machine guns, while removing the jump jets. This changes the Catapult so much that it almost operates like a different mech altogether. The Thunderbolt is a good multi-role mech. At 65 tons, the mech has a walking movement of 4 and running movement of 6 with no jump jets. Armed with a large laser, LRM-15, 3 medium lasers, a SRM-2, and 2 machine guns, the mech produces a max damage per ton of 0.71 and adjusted damage per ton of 0.62. With a wide mix of weapon types, the Thunderbolt can attack effectively at both long and short ranges. Ample ammunition for its weapons also gives it better than average endurance, although having 3 different ammunition types in one mech can be problematic. Heat efficiency is 63%, which is not stellar, but considering the weapon variety, it should not be too difficult to mix the weapon's fire in such a way to keep heat under control. Armor protection is excellent, with an armor per ton score of 3.2. I consider the Thunderbolt to be a good multi-threat mech that has few definitive weaknesses. Strong armor that of those mechs in the video game is only beaten by the Orion in the heavyweight class. With the Thunderbolt out-damaging the Orion and running cooler in the process, all while being 10 tons lighter, shows how effective of a mech this is. Its long-range firepower is good, although maybe not quite strong enough to fill the support role. It comes close. The mech's only real weakness is its mobility, which is average for the class, so really not that bad, but it does prevent it from truly being well-rounded. Heat efficiency is a bit of a weakness, but when considering the class, it is not an uncommon problem. Having 3 different ammunition-fed weapon systems isn't the most efficient use of tonnage, but is less of a problem at higher weight classes where heat is more of a concern than using the most weight-efficient equipment. Although removing one of the ammunition-fed weapons, for example the SRM-2 or machine guns, could free up some space for more heat sinks. In an attempt to keep the same levels of damage, one of the ammunition-fed weapons could be replaced for the other. For example, the SRM-2 could be replaced by another 2 machine guns, sharing its ammo with the already existing machine guns, having a single heat sink added as well. As machine guns don't generate heat, there wouldn't be an extra burden on the heat sinks, and weight is used more efficiently at the cost of reducing the range at which the damage can be done. In this way, I have kept max damage the same while lowering max heat that can be generated and increase the number of heat sinks. The last mech on this list is the 85-ton Stalker. With a walking speed of 3 and running speed of 5 and no jumping movement, mobility is not the mech's strong suit. Weaponry, on the other hand, is its strong suit, armed with a staggering number of weapons including 2 LRM-10s, 2 large lasers, 4 medium lasers, and 2 SRM-6s. Max damage per ton is 0.94, and adjusted damage per ton is 0.75. Heat efficiency is correspondingly terrible at 45%. This is somewhat misleading though, as the Stalker is not meant to fire all of its weapons at once. If separating the weaponry into long and close range groups, the heat sinks do a much better job of coping with the heat generated by the weapons. Even after separating the weapons into groups in this way, damage that can be produced by this mech is intense. Firing the 2 SRM-6s and 4 medium lasers in a salvo can compete with the firepower of a Battlemaster at that same range. And the Stalker will run cooler while doing it too. Armor protection is decent at an armor per ton score of 2.54, but it is not the strong suit of the mech. The Stalker is a weapons platform first and foremost. This pushes it somewhat into the support role in which its long-range firepower acquits it well, but its substantial short-range barrage also makes it a frightening mech in the frontline role. Its armor is good enough to protect it in the frontline role, but there is no denying that there are more heavily armored mechs in its weight class. I have a warm spot in my heart for the Stalker. I like the way it looks. Maybe they are looks only a mother could love, but I can't help loving them, and I appreciate what the mech is all about. It may be slow and could be better armored, but you better not underestimate the Stalker, or it will leave a crater where your mech used to be. There are a couple different variants of the mech, which usually revolve around modifying the LRMs or the large lasers. I would say in general, these modifications result in less maximum damage while decreasing the heat burden on the Stalker. Seeing as the Stalker struggles the most with heat in the long-range bracket, these variants make sense. If you are more interested in doing damage at shorter ranges, then the STK-4N stands out as it removes one LRM-10 and replaces it with 6 heat sinks, making it more viable to use at least one of the large lasers along with the medium lasers and SRMs at short ranges. Of course, this is accomplished by giving up long-range firepower, and considering how slow the mech is, I'm not that big of a fan of the idea. And with that, I'm going to wrap up the list of my favorite mechs going to be in the upcoming BattleTech video game. Just like with anything that people consider their favorite, it is a personal preference. Some mechs are going to appeal to people in different ways. I, for example, have a strong attachment to the Cicada, even though I recognize its flaws and the fact it may perform badly when introduced into the video game. I very much look forward to your stories and choices of mechs that are your personal favorites. In any case, I hope you guys have enjoyed the video. This is Mouse Gunner, signing out.